Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to speak to you. We have so many questions for you, and I just think what you do is so incredibly admirable. So, firstly, well done for creating such an amazing platform that people can go to when they're in a real time of need.
Oh, thank you. Look, it's extremely rewarding work, and we're just really dedicated to making sure we get people the right information as early as possible.
Yeah, I'm literally, even as you said that, I got chills because I'm, and we'll get into this, I am someone who experienced mental health difficulties during pregnancy and beyond. So let me introduce to all those listening, Dr. Nicole Highet. She's the founder and executive director of COPE, which has a mission to raise awareness, reduce stigma and empower families facing perinatal mental health challenges. And she's also a doctor of psychology. So first and foremost, can you tell us, Nicole, why COPE?
Well, COPE stands for Centre of Perinatal Excellence. So we're the peak body in this mental health area around the time of having a baby. So this is the time in a woman's life when we know she's most likely to develop a mental health problem. And in fact, suicide is a leading cause of maternal death in Australia and in many countries. So it's very, very serious. And the reason for developing COPE was really an opportunity for a focus on what comes before people get to that point. Of course, we address the mental health problems as well, but also what are the identifiers or what are the triggers or what are the risk factors that we can do something about rather than just focusing on the illness. What can we do about preventing the illness? So we have a big focus on prevention, early intervention, as well as treating the full range of mental health conditions, whether they're mild through to very severe.
When you say treating, can you give us a bit of an understanding as to what that could look like?
It really depends on the condition. So we have common conditions like anxiety and depression, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. They can be treated with effective therapies or medical treatments. And then you have your far more severe conditions like postpartum psychosis or managing schizophrenia in pregnancy. And of course, those conditions require medical interventions, but they're very specialised because we need to make sure the medications we're prescribing or recommending for professionals are safe to use in pregnancy and when breastfeeding. So it's a very complicated area.
Oh, I can imagine. And I just think I wonder, so I'm naturally an anxious person. I'm very like that type A, get shit done kind of character, right? And I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I like to call myself a recovering perfectionist. And before having children, I was very work hard, play hard. Everything is just to the extreme. So when I work, and when I play, I play. And then all of a sudden I was pregnant and everything sort of stops and you feel exhausted and you feel like, do I even want to get out of bed? And then you start thinking, hold on, what's my life going to look like now? And does that mean I'm so fortunate and lucky and happy? In my case, I wasn't actually trying to fall pregnant. I'd come off the pill and I thought I'll give my body a year to adjust and then we'll see what happens. And straight away I fell pregnant. And so there was a little bit of that surprise element to it as well. And in my type A way of liking things structured and organised and in the calendar, and I've got my spreadsheets, I was like, whoa, this is a bit of a surprise spanner in the works. But, obviously I was in at the time I was in a loving relationship. So obviously I was incredibly happy. But I think what got me was I wasn't ready for the mixed bag of emotions that I would feel. So after the initial elation, that it was that feeling of I feel so defeated. It was almost just like a blanket came over me and I couldn't see the wood for the trees. I'd get up in my type A way and I'd get my job done that day and all I'd want to do is get home and rest versus, my usual sort of state is get home and then see if I can socialise with friends and catch up with people and go for a coffee, go for a dinner, whatever. That just all went away and that really shocked me. And it took me a long time to actually realise that something was wrong at the time. And it was actually my partner, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, friends, families, partners, etc., who might raise it before that person's even realised that there is a real sort of mental health issue that they're experiencing. So I don't know, for me, I guess my first question is, are more a certain characters, certain personality types like mine, like the type A's and the highly anxious, more susceptible to having mental health issues? Let's start with pregnancy, right?
Yep.
During that period, or is it a bit of a mixed bag?
We certainly know that type A personalities, like you described yourself, are more at risk, first of all. So people who like to be really organised, have routine and order in their life, and can become upset if things don't go to plan, they are definitely type A, and they are more at risk because not everything goes to plan when you're having a baby. So you were trying and had consciously decided to try. You know, there's people who fall pregnant unexpectedly. That's more common than we think. But also, particularly in the postnatal period where you can't always manage everything and the baby doesn't do exactly what you want, when you want it, how you want it, that's a very, very, very challenging time for type A people. So the risk of anxiety, particularly, I think, then is very high for parents who are type A. And then if they feel like they're failing, obviously that can increase their risk of self-esteem and depression developing both antenatally or postnatally.
Yeah, it's so true. And then others, it might just creep up on them. They say sometimes it's like, is it hormonal? Is it genetic, these mental health conditions? What's your take on it?
Yeah, so again, this is another reason why this is so complex, because it's likely to be a combination of, we talk about, hormonal factors, we talk about environmental factors, we talk about psychological factors. There are so many different things at play at this life stage that make it so complex. And they also change from day to day or time to time as well. Things like your support networks are so important, your level of understanding about perinatal mental health is so important, your experience with your care providers, your support from your partner. All of these things will play a role in your risk. So they're things that we very much are focused on. How do we maximise the benefits in this person's life to give them the best opportunity, but also reduce the risks?
Yes. And even via my story and my experience, as I said, my husband, Jules, is the one that said Leonie's not herself. I started seeing a psychologist. The psychologist suggested that I bring Jules to a session. Mm-hmm. He sat there and I was like, I remember I was completely zoned out, like basically just looking at the wall. And she said, okay, Jules, so tell me, what's your experience been like? And I remember he just burst into tears. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I don't know what's happened. Like, we were happy and now and I remember as he was crying, I was sitting there and I was just so zoned out. And in my normal state, like today, I say normal in talking marks because are we really even normal? But in my more usual state, common state, seeing my partner getting upset, I would have started getting upset or at least have a bit of empathy. At the time though, I was just like, I look over at him, I just sort of shrugged. I'm like, oh my God, like seriously. Like there was no feeling. Mm-hmm. I was so in my own little world, had no empathy whatsoever, and I could absolutely admit to that today. So, you support the people who are, experiencing the mental health issues. What guidance, and also we will get to some audience questions too, guys. Yeah. I told you I had so much for Nicole today. But what guidance would you provide to those partners who might be listening going, you know what, I'm really struggling as well?
Look, I think, first of all, it's just use an analogy of what if this person had a physical health problem. If I've noticed a change, if I notice that they're struggling, if they were limping and got up limping, I would ask them what was wrong. I would talk to them about getting help, finding out what's going on, how else can I support you? So it's really important that we do open up that conversation and we acknowledge as a couple that this is going to be a challenging time. There is going to be, for both of us, in different ways. Obviously, women or the birthing parent is most at risk, but also we know that partners are also at risk at this life stage. There's a lot of adjustments for them. The relationship adjusts the financial pressures, all of these things are changing for both partners. We also know if say, for example, the female might experiencing anti or postnatal depression, the partner is 50% more likely to develop a condition themselves. So it's really important that we talk about it early and check in with each other. And of course, it's possible that the partner might experience on their own without both of them, but it certainly does increase that risk factor there.
Absolutely. So I guess if someone listening is feeling like they are struggling themselves due to their partner perhaps who is carrying, pregnant at the time, would you suggest then them also considering going to speak to someone, a therapist or something, to support themselves as well?
Yeah, look, I'd always start with your GP. So your GP is a good first port of call. First of all, because they can help you to say, understand if this is normal or, just something that will pass or it's likely to be something else. And also then a GP is ideally placed because they could develop, if they do think you need to see a psychologist, they can provide for you a mental health care plan, which means you can access those with support from Medicare. So certainly seeing the GP is always recommended as the first step.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so I'm going to throw some audience questions, and thank you to everyone who wrote in. We had a massive response to this. Everyone was very excited to ask you questions, Nicole.
Excellent. I love that.
I chose some of the questions that I felt would relate to the most people. So we had someone DM saying it took us 3 years to fall pregnant with our second, and the repeated disappointment each month affected my self-esteem and our relationship. What advice do you give couples who feel like their entire life is on hold while trying to conceive?
Look, this is it's such a significant issue and it's often not spoken about. And these couples who are going through infertility, and particularly in this case where what we call secondary infertility, so they've been able to have their first child, so particularly frustrating when they then can't have their second, and that's posing lots of questions. A lot of these people are experiencing immense amounts of stress and distress. There's major impacts going through infertility, impacts on all areas of your life. Your intimate relationship with your partner, obviously, that is changed with the focus on becoming pregnant. Relationships with family and friends, trying to avoid social situations where you're constantly being asked about when are you going to have a second or when are you guys going to have a baby, that constant pressure. Just the disappointment when other people around you are getting pregnant and easily getting pregnant, and you're trying to be happy for them but can't really talk about your own experience or feel guilty about talking about your own experience. The financial pressure. I mean, this is just showing the complexity of this space and how so many factors are at play and impacting ultimately on the emotional and mental health. So we know that rates of stress, anxiety and depression are higher in people who are going through infertility experiences, and often they feel very alone because they're not able to share their experience with others, and they're trying to create that privacy, but so they're not bombarding with questions, but that means that they don't have access to support. So one of the areas that COPE does actually specialise in is mental health and infertility, and one of the only organisations that does actually. A lot will focus on pregnancy and postnatal, but we do have a really big focus on couples going through infertility, and even then, if achieving a pregnancy, we know those people are, the women particularly and couples can be more at risk of anxiety during that pregnancy because of they've waited so long and similarly with someone's experienced the loss as well. So if my recommendation for couples there is, with all the infertility appointments and IVF and everything that can go with it, don't forget to think about your emotional and mental health. And in fact, on the COPE website, we have self-checks for people going specifically through infertility, where you can monitor your own levels of anxiety, stress and depression, and that will help you to understand, is this hormones or is it something else? And just having that additional support and mechanisms to help you relax and reduce your level of anxiety and distress can ultimately only help with, falling pregnant potentially, but particularly your emotional and mental health and wellbeing and your relationship at this very challenging time.
Yeah, it's so fantastic, that resource, guys. I'm going to, in the show notes, we're going to put the COPE website in. Check them out if any of these sort of topics are resonating with you and you feel like you might need that little bit of extra support. I think it's fantastic, Nicole, what you've created and the team behind you as well. Okay, another DM that came through was about birth trauma. So I experienced birth trauma and felt embarrassed to admit it. Is this common, and how do we recover from it?
Yes, birth trauma can be quite common. There's statistics that are going around saying 1 in 3 people experience a traumatic birth. Our data from screening women, particularly women, over, we've got over 200,000 screens, suggests that it might be around 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people. So So birth trauma can result from the birth experience obviously not going to plan. There can be physical trauma and psychological trauma. And sometimes, we often think, well, it must be because something physiological happened that led to that psychological birth trauma. But it can also be other things around the time of birth as well. So not only the birth event itself, but how you were treated by health professionals. That can add to a level of trauma. And I think another thing that's really magnifying the distress for people who have not had the birth experience that they wanted is that often there's this attitude by others, well, be satisfied, you've got a healthy baby. Just be grateful, you've got a beautiful, healthy baby. And this sort of response prevents the person actually talking about what actually happened and getting support for the event. And it doesn't enable that that closure afterwards as well. So generally, from a clinical point of view, we'd say if you're still experiencing distress, say 3 months after the birth, so you might be experiencing distressing memories, what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. So we often associate that with wars and terrible events. People will experience those sort of re-emerging impulsive and intrusive thoughts about their birth experience. That can be certainly a sign that it's time to seek help. But also just, even if it doesn't go to that extent, talking through your experience with someone to help you understand and put the context together about what actually happened. Because sometimes when you're in that aroused, anxious state and very distressed, you'll pull out bits of information. And so just putting the pieces together and talking it through can be very helpful in your own time and when you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we did a lot of that I'm thinking about my girlfriends and I sharing in talking about some war stories when it came to birth and the things we did expect and the things we didn't. And you're right, it does normalise the experience to some extent. I personally didn't experience trauma per se, but there is that feeling of like, oh, wow, like that was a lot. So you're right, for those feeling like they're sort of repeating, these awful thoughts and really going down a bit of a rabbit hole when it comes to this. Great to know that there's support out there. Another one that I want to talk to is resentment during the pregnancy towards my partner. Mm-hmm. And I like this one because it's a bit more taboo and I can a little bit relate to it too. So this person said, I struggled with resentment towards my partner during my pregnancy. I'm embarrassed to admit this because I was thrilled to be pregnant, but I was jealous that my partner could live their normal life, like drink alcohol, exercise in the same way, and not have the daily symptoms of pregnancy. Is resentment during pregnancy common? And what do we do when we feel it creeps in? And also just where can people turn to if they're experiencing mental health issues during that conception and pregnancy phase? So I feel like that second part of the question we've obviously spoken to around the amazing resource that COPE is for all of us parents. But, is resentment common?
Yes, look, it is common, and it certainly can start in pregnancy, and it certainly can reach a pinnacle in the postnatal period. Your partner seems to be going to work, they've got their life, you're stuck there, you're feeling like a whale, you're feeling you've got the hormones going through you, you're recovering from birth, your life's on hold, your social life has dropped off, you're isolated. Certainly, it's totally understandable why people feel resentful, and it's nothing to be ashamed about. It's a natural reaction. It's a natural emotion. I think these days, there's more expectation that partners will be more supportive in ways. So quite often it's, both partners will now during pregnancy abstain from alcohol or reduce alcohol consumption. But, I think it's certainly something that it is there and it can certainly elevate in the postnatal period as well. So, again, we'll talk a little bit about resources, but there's a great resource for both parents called the Ready to Cope Guide. So this is a free weekly guide for both mothers and fathers, expectant and new mothers and fathers, and it just gives you these tips and insights about what you can do. And for the guys, it's about staying on the right side, or the partners, and how they can really support you when you're going through it, and understand what you're going through and why you might react the way you do. It just gives you that level of insight and understanding that it's very hard to get that information anywhere else, especially with Instagram and social media these days telling us that everything is glowing and wonderful in pregnancy and perfect postnatally. That's not the reality, and the Ready to Cope guide will help to really correct those misconceptions.
Yeah, I love that. We're very fortunate to have Tommy Tippy as our episode sponsor. Can you talk to us a little bit about how Tommy Tippy has supported the amazing work that you're doing?
Oh, look, Tommy Tippy's been a fantastic partner for several years now, and the most recent contribution that they have enabled us to do is develop these self-checks on the website. So we're getting a significant number of people every day coming in and doing the self-checks for anxiety, stress and depression around infertility or during pregnancy, in the postnatal period. We have a birth trauma self-check as well, and we also have a postnatal rage self-check. So all of these are there to help people understand, is this normal or is it time to actually seek help? And just the whole process of doing these self-checks helps raise awareness about what the symptoms are, but importantly, make people realise they're not alone and help is available.
Yeah, I love that. We are going to talk all things postnatal in our next episode with you, Nicole. Before you leave us for this episode, can I ask if there's one message that you wish every parent could hear during conception and pregnancy, what do you think it would be?
First of all, I would say you're not alone. In your experience, it might feel like you're alone because the information channels around you are not necessarily mirroring your experience. There is still a high level of stigma in the community, and this, I do think social media has perpetuated this imagery about what it's supposed to be like and what success is. Being a parent is going to come with good days and bad, and we can't control everything. So my number one message is you're not alone. My number two message is be prepared and reassured by accessing quality information. And that's where the Ready to Cope guide has been especially developed for people to make sure they're getting that realistic, credible information and realise they're not alone right through their journey, and be directed to self-checks to make sure that you can identify at any time in yourself or others if you might need additional supports.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to drop all of that info in the show notes, and Nicole will join us for part 2 of this conversation. Thanks so much for your time, Nicole.
Thanks, Leonie.